Good evening. Tonight, we enter a conversation that is sparking intense debate across the country. It's an issue that strikes at the core of what it means to be a parent, an educator, and a child navigating today's complex world. The question being asked is this: are schools making decisions about a child's gender identity without informing or involving their parents? While some dismiss the question as alarmist, others see growing evidence that policies and practices are being implemented behind closed doors. This is not just a topic of politics, it is about trust, responsibility, and the well-being of children. Parents send their children to school expecting transparency, expecting to be informed when important things happen in their child's life. That trust is foundational. It's based on the belief that schools and families are partners, not opponents. But what happens when that trust is tested by policies that allow students to socially transition at school, adopting new names, pronouns, or identities without parental involvement? Is this protection or is it secrecy? And more importantly, who gets to decide what is in the best interest of the child? Some school districts have adopted confidentiality rules that shield gender identity changes from parents. Educators are sometimes instructed to refer to a child by one name at school and another at home. Supporters argue that these rules protect children who might be unsafe or unsupported at home. But critics raise a vital concern. Do these policies override the fundamental rights of parents to be involved in life, changing decisions affecting their children? If a child is struggling with identity, shouldn't the people who know and love them best be brought into the conversation, not cut out of it? Another point of concern is the role schools are playing in these deeply personal matters. There are reports of teachers and school counselors engaging students in discussions about gender identity without prior parental consent. While education about diversity and inclusion is necessary, some feel the line between teaching and influencing is being blurred. Parents are asking, is the school guiding my child or steering them toward a path they may not be ready to fully understand? And do teachers, who are not licensed therapists or doctors, have the right tools to help a child make such decisions? Mental health is central to this conversation. Adolescence is a vulnerable period. Kids go through emotional highs and lows, and many struggle with identity and self-worth. Exploring gender is not inherently harmful, but making decisions without clinical oversight or parental support can be risky. Schools are not clinics. They are not equipped to make decisions that can have long-term psychological and emotional impacts. When a school affirms a new identity without collaborating with the family, is it helping or potentially harming that student in the long run? Educators themselves are feeling the pressure. Many are caught between conflicting directives, district policies, personal ethics, and legal risks. They want to support students but also respect the rights of parents. Some are afraid to speak up, fearing backlash. Others worry that by following policies blindly, they're participating in something that may later be questioned in court or by history. At the same time, legal cases are being filed across the nation by parents who say they were kept in the dark. These lawsuits are not just about individual families. They are setting legal precedents about what schools can and cannot do without parental consent. In the midst of all this noise, it's easy to forget the voice that matters most, the child. Some children say school support gave them the courage to live authentically. Others, years later, say they felt pressured to make changes they didn't fully understand at the time. What's clear is that this issue is not black and white. It's complicated, it's emotional, but one thing is certain: when it comes to decisions as sensitive and personal as gender identity, communication, respect, and collaboration should not be optional. They should be the foundation. No child should be used as a battleground for politics, and no parent should be left in the dark about their own child. You said, behind closed doors. the role of confidentiality policies expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, across the country, there is growing concern among parents about what is happening behind the closed doors of school offices and classrooms. Confidentiality policies are at the center of the debate. These policies in many school districts allow children to request name and pronoun changes at school without requiring parental notification. In some cases, educators are explicitly instructed not to inform parents if a student identifies differently at school than they do at home. This has left many parents feeling betrayed and excluded from critical conversations about their child's well-being and development. They ask, how can we support our children when we're being kept in the dark? Supporters of these policies argue that they are necessary to protect vulnerable children, especially those who might face rejection, emotional harm, or even abuse at home if their identity were revealed without their consent. They believe school should be a safe haven where students can explore who they are without fear. In this view, confidentiality policies are a form of protection, giving children space to be themselves and seek guidance without judgment. For some students, these policies have provided the only support they feel they can count on, especially when they believe their families may not understand or accept them. However, opponents of these confidentiality rules see them as a dangerous overstep of authority. They argue that schools are not only excluding parents, but undermining the essential trust that is supposed to exist between families and educators. When schools adopt policies that tell staff to withhold information from parents, critics say they are no longer acting as educators, but as gatekeepers of a child's identity. These policies can create division between children and their parents, making meaningful dialogue at home more difficult. The assumption that every parent is potentially unsafe risks alienating families who genuinely want to support their child but are simply unaware of what's happening. The secrecy created by these policies can have long-term consequences. Adolescence is already a time of confusion and intense self-discovery. When decisions about identity are being made in secret, it can isolate students from the very people who could provide emotional grounding and long-term guidance. While some students may benefit from temporary privacy, others may later regret decisions made without the input or presence of their parents. Confidentiality, in this case, becomes a double-edged sword, intended to protect, but capable of harming when important conversations are delayed or avoided altogether. It's also important to consider the emotional burden placed on teachers and school staff under these policies. Many educators enter the profession to teach and inspire, not to navigate delicate psychological and familial matters. Being asked to keep secrets from parents or to affirm a new identity without full context or family involvement puts them in an ethically uncomfortable position. Some fear legal consequences, while others are concerned about the emotional toll on students if they are forced to live dual identities, one at home and another at school. The weight of this responsibility, without proper training or support, leaves many feeling conflicted and overburdened. Legal challenges to these policies are now making their way through courts across the nation. Parents are filing lawsuits claiming that their rights have been violated by school systems that kept them uninformed. These cases are not just isolated incidents, they are shaping legal precedent about the role of schools, the scope of parental rights, and the future of student privacy. Lawmakers and judges will ultimately have to decide whether schools have the authority to implement such policies, or whether they must defer to parents when it comes to their children's identity and emotional development. In the end, the debate over confidentiality policies is not just about politics. It's about principles. It's about how we define the roles of parents, educators, and students in a world where identity is becoming more fluid and more visible. The challenge is not to choose one side over the other, but to find a way forward that respects children's needs while honoring the role of families. Communication, compassion, and collaboration should be at the heart of this conversation, not silence, secrecy, or fear. Because when schools and families work together, children benefit most. You said, empowering vs. undermining parents expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, some of the most emotional and contentious conversations surrounding school policies today revolve around the relationship between schools and parents. At the center of this is a growing sense among many families that their role in their child's life is being quietly pushed aside. Parents expect to be the primary decision makers in their child's upbringing. They are legally and morally responsible for their child's well-being, education, and development. When schools adopt policies that allow significant identity decisions to occur without parental input, many families see this not just as overreach, but as a direct challenge to their fundamental rights. Supporters of such policies often argue that they are necessary to protect students who may not feel safe at home. They believe that some parents are simply not equipped or willing to understand a child questioning their gender identity, and that keeping parents uninformed can be a form of temporary protection. This perspective stems from compassion for vulnerable students who may face hostility or misunderstanding in their home environment. For these advocates, empowering students to express themselves authentically at school is a way to foster mental health and personal safety. Yet there is a growing concern that this approach inadvertently undermines the role of the parent in a child's life. For many parents, it is deeply painful to think that their child could be experiencing a major internal struggle while being counseled by teachers, administrators, or counselors, people who care, yes, but who do not have the same lifelong commitment or understanding of that child. Parents are left feeling helpless, like strangers to their own children's inner world. The idea that a school might actively hide a child's new identity from their family feels not only deceptive, but also deeply damaging to the parent-child bond. In many cases, these conversations are not happening because parents are unwilling to talk. They're not happening because the school has already decided it's safer or more appropriate to exclude them. This blanket approach assumes that every home is a hostile environment, which is simply not true. Many parents, when given the opportunity and the proper tools, want to be supportive. They may need guidance. They may have questions, but excluding them entirely eliminates the chance for understanding and growth. Without that involvement, families lose the opportunity to evolve together through difficult but meaningful conversations. Another critical point to consider is the inconsistency of how schools apply these rules. Some districts enforce them strictly. Others leave it up to individual educators to decide whether or not to notify parents. This lack of standardization creates confusion and sometimes chaos as families try to navigate policies that seem designed to keep them out. A parent may find out months later that their child has been using a different name at school, causing feelings of betrayal and shock that could have been avoided with honest, early communication. When schools make these decisions unilaterally, they remove the opportunity for families to be a united front in supporting their child. These issues are not only about values, but also about practical consequences. When parents are removed from key moments in their child's emotional or identity development, it can create long-term mistrust. Children may begin to feel they must choose between being authentic and being loved. Parents may feel sidelined or demonized, and schools, though trying to act with compassion, may find themselves unintentionally creating more conflict and confusion rather than reducing it. The fallout from that tension does not stay inside school walls. It follows the student home, into their relationships, and even into their future decisions. Ultimately, the goal should not be to pick a side between school and parent, but to find a way forward that honors both the student's need for safety and the parent's right to be involved. Schools should serve as bridges between a student and their family, not barriers. There must be space for sensitive, informed conversations that support the student while still respecting the vital role parents play. When schools empower parents with information and resources rather than keeping them in the dark, everyone benefits. At the heart of this debate is a simple truth. Children thrive best when they are supported by both the people who teach them and the people who raise them. You said, when education becomes identity, coaching, expand it into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, there is a growing concern among many parents and education experts that some schools may be moving beyond their educational role into areas of personal development that traditionally fall under the responsibility of families. When schools begin facilitating or affirming a student's gender transition without consulting or informing parents, it introduces a new kind of involvement, one that feels less like academic guidance and more like personal identity coaching. For many, this represents a major shift in how schools are expected to function and where their responsibilities should end. The classroom has long been a place to learn about society, history, and the diversity of human experiences. However, the question is now being asked, when does education about gender and identity stop being about information and begin influencing decisions? If a student is questioning their identity, and the first people they talk to are school staff rather than their parents or licensed therapists, the line between teaching and personal intervention starts to blur. While intentions may be compassionate, the consequences of such involvement can be far-reaching. There is a distinct difference between providing information and actively guiding a student through a major personal transformation. Some teachers may find themselves offering affirmation, encouragement, or advice, sometimes without fully understanding the child's mental health history, family dynamics, or emotional readiness. While a supportive adult can make a world of difference for a struggling student, stepping into a role that involves affirming identity changes may require training and responsibility that most educators are not equipped to carry. Critics argue that affirming a student's new identity without broader context or parental awareness may contribute to rushed or incomplete decision-making. Adolescence is a developmental period marked by exploration, insecurity, and evolving self-understanding. A student may experiment with different aspects of identity, but that does not always indicate a permanent shift. Schools that respond with immediate affirmation risk locking a student into a label or identity before deeper discussions have taken place. Support without careful discernment can sometimes do more harm than good. Meanwhile, some students later report that they felt encouraged by school staff to adopt a new identity even before they fully understood what it meant for them. They recall feeling supported in the moment but confused and isolated later, especially when their families were unaware or uninvolved. Without open lines of communication between schools and families, students are often forced to navigate this emotional terrain alone or with only partial support. This can place significant pressure on young people to make decisions that carry long-term emotional and social consequences. Teachers and counselors are not trained mental health professionals in most cases, yet they are often the ones having deeply personal conversations with students about gender, identity, and self-image. With minimal resources and under the pressure of district policies, they may make decisions or offer affirmations that seem supportive in the short term, but may not hold up under future scrutiny. This is not only a disservice to students, but also puts undue burden on educators who were never trained to handle such situations with clinical insight. As we move forward, it is crucial to distinguish between education and intervention. Schools must be safe, inclusive environments where students feel seen and respected, but they must also remain within the bounds of their professional role, encouraging open dialogue, providing general support, and making referrals to mental health professionals when needed are appropriate. Assuming responsibility for a student's identity development without parental knowledge or professional oversight is not. The goal should be to support students in ways that involve all necessary voices, especially their families, and to ensure no one carries more responsibility than they are trained to bear. You said, mental health and informed decisions expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, adolescence is a critical period marked by rapid physical, emotional, and psychological changes. During this time, many young people begin exploring aspects of who they are, including their gender identity. It's a time of self-discovery, confusion, and vulnerability. For some, questioning their gender is a deeply personal and evolving experience. While it's important that students feel supported during this process, the complexity of identity development makes it essential that decisions surrounding it are handled with care, patience, and professional insight. When these matters are approached too casually or without full context, the risk of long-term emotional harm increases. Mental health professionals spend years learning how to help individuals navigate identity issues, trauma, and psychological distress. They are trained to recognize the difference between a passing phase and a deeper, more consistent pattern of identity development. In contrast, most teachers, counselors, and administrators are not equipped with that kind of expertise. While their intentions may be caring and protective, stepping into roles that involve affirming or guiding identity, transitions without proper training can create more confusion than clarity for the student. Emotional support is important, but it should not replace comprehensive mental health care. When schools take steps such as changing a student's pronouns or name without a mental health evaluation or consultation with parents, they may be making emotionally significant decisions that should involve more thorough assessment. These changes are not merely administrative. They are affirmations of identity that can impact how the child views themselves, how they are treated by peers, and how their development unfolds. Without understanding the psychological factors at play, a well-intentioned decision may contribute to a student committing to an identity path before they are fully ready to do so. There are students who feel validated and empowered by early affirmation. However, there are also individuals who later regret changes made during adolescence, saying they felt rushed or lacked proper support to explore their feelings more deeply before making those choices. These voices cannot be ignored. A growing number of young adults have come forward sharing experiences of feeling encouraged to transition socially at school without having the emotional tools or maturity to understand the long-term implications. Many say they would have benefited from deeper psychological evaluation and open conversations with their families. Some schools justify secrecy by arguing that not all homes are safe environments for identity exploration. While there are tragic cases where children face rejection or harm from family members, this is not the majority. Assuming that all parents will react negatively does a disservice to families who want to love and understand their children, but need guidance on how to do so. Rather than cutting parents out, schools could play a vital role in building bridges, connecting students and parents with therapists, counselors, and resources that foster understanding instead of driving wedges between them. Mental health decisions, especially those related to identity, should never be made in isolation. They require a team approach, one that includes the student, trained professionals, and ideally, their family. Only with all parties working together can a clear and supportive path be forged. When a student's emotional health is involved, assumptions should never take the place of communication and proper care. Schools can be part of that support system, but they should not act alone in making decisions that can shape a child's emotional and psychological development for years to come. Ultimately, every child deserves to feel safe, heard, and respected. But safety and affirmation must be paired with thoughtful, informed decision making that takes the whole child into account emotionally, psychologically, and socially. Schools should be environments where support is offered responsibly and where mental health is treated with the seriousness it deserves. By involving families, mental health professionals, and educators in an honest and compassionate partnership, we can ensure that students are not only protected but truly cared for in a way that supports their growth and long-term well-being. You said, the classroom isn't a clinic expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, in recent years, schools have taken on an increasingly active role in students' emotional and personal development. While this has brought more awareness to issues such as bullying, anxiety, and identity, it has also raised important questions about the boundaries of that role. One growing concern is that schools are beginning to act more like therapeutic environments than educational institutions. In particular, when schools begin affirming a child's gender transition without medical consultation or parental involvement, it begins to resemble clinical intervention, something most educators are not qualified to provide. The reality is that the classroom is not a clinic. Teachers, while compassionate and committed to their students' growth, are trained to educate, not diagnose or treat psychological conditions. When a student begins to question their identity, the emotional complexity of that experience is often significant. It may involve confusion, anxiety, past trauma, or struggles with self-esteem. These are not issues that can be resolved with a simple name change or by adopting different pronouns. They require thoughtful evaluation by licensed professionals who understand the depth of what the student may be going through. Without a clinical setting, there is no structured framework for assessment, no psychological testing, no mental health history review, and no long-term therapeutic relationship. This means any action taken in a school setting, such as affirming a new gender identity, is done without the tools needed to make fully informed decisions. Even if done with kindness, these actions can have unintended consequences. A student who is praised for a new identity may feel pressure to maintain that identity even if their feelings change. Without careful guidance, this pressure can grow into long-term emotional strain. It is important to recognize that identity exploration is not a bad thing. In fact, it is a natural part of growing up. Many young people go through periods of questioning who they are. But just because a student expresses discomfort with their gender or starts to use a new name doesn't necessarily mean they are ready to socially transition. That decision should come after thoughtful discussion with a mental health provider, preferably one working in coordination with the family. When schools act independently, they risk making long-term decisions based on short-term feelings. Another serious issue is the potential for missed warning signs. Some students who express a desire to transition may also be experiencing depression, anxiety, trauma, or other mental health challenges. A trained clinician can identify these overlapping issues and address them appropriately. A school, however, may only see the surface behavior and respond to it without digging deeper. This can lead to missed opportunities for meaningful intervention and healing. In some cases, schools may even unintentionally mask a larger emotional issue by focusing solely on gender identity. Teachers and counselors, though well-meaning, should not be put in the position of acting as emotional gatekeepers for something as complex as gender identity. The responsibility placed on them by these situations is not only inappropriate but deeply unfair. Educators are already overburdened, and adding therapeutic roles to their workload only increases the risk of mistakes. Students deserve to be supported by professionals with the right training and experience to help them navigate their challenges with care and precision. Ultimately, supporting students means knowing when to step in and when to refer out. Schools can and should be places where students feel accepted and valued. But when a student is going through something that touches the core of who they are, it is vital to bring in trained mental health professionals and involve families wherever possible. By recognizing that classrooms are not clinics, we create a more responsible, ethical, and effective system of support, one that truly meets the needs of each student in a safe and informed way. You said, teachers on the front lines, heroes or hostages. Expand it into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, teachers today are being asked to play roles far beyond the traditional responsibilities of educating and guiding students through academics. In the current climate, they are increasingly placed on the front lines of emotionally charged social issues, especially when it comes to gender identity. Policies related to student confidentiality, pronoun usage, and name changes have turned teachers into intermediaries between schools and families. Many teachers feel unprepared and even trapped by these roles, torn between district mandates and their own personal or professional judgment. What was once a position centered on teaching subjects has become one that now demands navigating identity politics, emotional health, and legal gray areas. Some educators find themselves in the difficult position of being told to withhold information from parents about a student's gender transition at school. For many, this directive directly conflicts with their own sense of ethics. Teachers are taught to support children, but also to respect the importance of the family structure. When forced to hide significant changes in a student's life from the student's parents, teachers may feel complicit in creating distance between the child and their home. This places emotional pressure on the educator, who must constantly question whether they are doing the right thing, not only for the student, but for the family as well. At the same time, some teachers fear that speaking up or questioning these policies could jeopardize their job security. In a polarized environment, expressing concern about confidentiality rules or parental involvement can be interpreted as insensitivity or opposition to inclusion. This fear of professional backlash has led many teachers to stay silent, even when they feel deeply uncomfortable with the policies they are asked to enforce. The pressure to conform can feel overwhelming, especially when educators are caught between the expectations of school administrators and the legitimate concerns of parents. This climate has created a situation where teachers are no longer just educators. They are now enforcers of policies they had no role in shaping, and sometimes no room to question. They are often required to make judgment calls about sensitive issues that could have long-term impacts on a student's life. Without sufficient training in child psychology or mental health, these decisions can become a heavy burden. A mistake or misunderstanding could result in parental outrage, legal action, or lasting harm to the student. The weight of such responsibility is too great to place on teachers without proper support and clear guidance. Educators enter the profession to help students grow and succeed, not to carry the psychological and legal weight of decisions better left to trained professionals and families. Teachers want to build trust with both their students and the students' parents. But when policies force them to choose one over the other, that trust begins to erode. Students may see them as allies in secrecy, while parents may view them as part of a system that is undermining their rights. This fractured trust makes it more difficult for teachers to do what they are meant to do: educate in a balanced and respectful environment. The pressure on teachers to manage these emotionally charged situations also contributes to burnout. Many educators report feeling drained, anxious, or unsupported as they try to navigate conversations around gender identity while balancing curriculum demands and behavioral expectations. The added emotional labor of managing sensitive disclosures without parental involvement can lead to mental exhaustion. With teacher shortages already plaguing schools across the country, adding layers of emotional strain to the job only worsens the situation. What teachers truly need is clarity, support, and a system that respects their professional boundaries. They should not be forced into roles that require medical or psychological expertise. Instead, schools should establish clear partnerships with mental health professionals and families so that the responsibility for a student's emotional well-being does not fall solely on educators. By creating policies that are transparent, consistent, and rooted in collaboration, schools can protect both students and teachers. When educators are free to teach without being caught in the middle of deeply personal and political issues, everyone in the school community benefits. You said, legal battles and national precedent expand it into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, across the country, a series of legal battles is emerging as families confront school districts over policies that they believe have excluded them from critical decisions involving their children. These legal cases are not isolated incidents. They are a growing movement of parents seeking to reclaim their role in their child's upbringing, especially in matters as sensitive as gender identity. The lawsuits allege that some schools have socially transitioned children, changing names, pronouns, and gender identities without notifying parents or seeking their involvement. For these parents, the issue isn't just about school policy. It's about a breach of trust and a violation of their fundamental parental rights. In many of these cases, the central legal question revolves around whether a public school has the authority to make deeply personal decisions on behalf of a child without parental consent. Some courts have already taken up these questions, examining whether such actions violate constitutional rights, including the 14th Amendment's guarantee of due process, which protects the right of parents to direct the upbringing of their children. The outcomes of these lawsuits are likely to set significant legal precedents that will influence how schools nationwide approach student confidentiality, identity changes, and family involvement. As these court cases unfold, they are forcing school districts, administrators, and lawmakers to examine the balance between student privacy and parental rights. Supporters of the current confidentiality policies argue that they are designed to protect vulnerable students from unsupportive or even abusive home environments. They believe that schools must be a safe space where students can explore their identity without fear of judgment. However, critics of these policies argue that schools are not mental health facilities and should not make decisions that have long-term emotional and psychological consequences without including the parents who are ultimately responsible for the child. The legal system is being asked to step in and define what authority schools truly have in this realm. Judges are now being tasked with weighing a school's duty to protect a student against a parent's right to know and be involved. These are not easy decisions. They must consider the potential harm to students who may be rejected at home, as well as the damage done when parents are left in the dark. The courts must find a way to navigate these deeply personal situations without undermining the legitimacy of either side's concerns. The stakes are high, as the rulings could reshape how schools across the nation approach everything from gender identity to counseling procedures. Beyond the courtroom, the public debate surrounding these cases is growing louder. School board meetings are becoming battlegrounds, with parents, activists, and educators speaking out on both sides. Some communities are demanding policy reversals, insisting that no school should ever conceal a child's identity from their parents. Others are pushing for even stronger privacy protections for students, arguing that a child's right to be safe and authentic must come before parental involvement. The tension between these opposing views is leading to policy shifts, political campaigns, and national headlines, making this issue one of the most debated topics in American education today. The legal challenges are also inspiring new legislation at both the state and federal level. Some states are moving to pass laws that require schools to inform parents of any changes to a student's gender identity or pronouns. Others are considering laws to strengthen student privacy and restrict schools from sharing such information without the student's consent. This patchwork of legal approaches is creating confusion and inconsistency, where a student's experience may vary dramatically depending on what state or district they live in. As these legal and legislative battles play out, they highlight the urgent need for clearer standards and policies that balance the needs of students and the rights of parents. In the end, these lawsuits and legal debates are not just about school rules. They are about the foundational principles of family, autonomy, and accountability. Whether one believes schools are acting out of compassion or overstepping their bounds, the courts will ultimately help define the limits of authority and the responsibilities of public institutions. What's at stake is more than just legal precedent. It's the future of how schools, families, and communities work together to raise and protect the next generation. Only by addressing these questions with honesty, respect, and a willingness to listen can lasting solutions be found. You said the voice of the child expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, in the middle of all the political debates, legal battles, and policy discussions surrounding gender identity in schools, one voice often gets lost: the voice of the child. While adults argue about what is best, it is the children themselves who are most directly impacted by the decisions being made. These students are navigating incredibly personal journeys, trying to understand who they are, all while being caught in the crossfire of cultural and ideological battles. Their perspectives, their needs, and their experiences must be at the center of any solution, because their emotional and psychological well-being is what truly matters in the end. Some students expressed that the support they received at school allowed them to be themselves in a way they couldn't at home. For them, being called by their chosen name or pronoun offered comfort, relief, and validation. In certain cases, school was the only place where they felt accepted. They credit this support for improving their mental health, helping them focus in class, and giving them the strength to face difficult days. These stories reflect genuine feelings of gratitude and show the powerful role educators can play in a student's life when that support is offered responsibly and respectfully. However, there is another side to this story, one that is becoming more visible as older students reflect on their experiences. Some now say they felt rushed or nudged into adopting a new identity without truly understanding the long-term implications. They recall teachers or staff members quickly affirming their new identity without much discussion, and without encouraging them to speak with their parents or a counselor. Looking back, they wish there had been more guidance, more conversation, and more opportunities to pause and explore before making life-altering choices in how they presented themselves to the world. These students often express a sense of confusion and isolation. Without their family involved, they felt they were living in 2 different worlds, one at home where they kept secrets and one at school where they were treated as someone else entirely. That split created a constant emotional burden. It wasn't just about identity, It was about carrying the weight of pretending, hiding, and trying to reconcile who they were with who they were expected to be in different spaces. The secrecy, rather than providing safety, often intensified feelings of loneliness and internal conflict. It's important to recognize that students are still developing emotionally and cognitively during their school years. They may not have the tools to fully understand the long-term consequences of decisions involving identity. While their feelings and experiences must be respected, they also deserve the chance to explore those feelings thoughtfully and with appropriate support. Rushing to affirm without offering space to reflect can lead to regret or emotional confusion down the road. What students need most is a safe space to talk openly with educators, counselors, and especially with their families. Respecting the voice of the child also means recognizing that no two students are the same. Some are ready to make decisions about how they identify, while others are still figuring things out. Schools should not apply a one-size-fits-all approach to identity support. Instead, every student should be met with individualized care, compassion, and the encouragement to involve trusted adults in their journey. A balanced approach that includes mental health guidance, open communication, and family involvement can create a stronger, more supportive environment for every student. Ultimately, listening to the voice of the child means more than simply affirming what they say in the moment. It means giving them space, time, and trusted support to grow into who they are. It means protecting them not just in the short term, but preparing them for long-term well-being and emotional resilience. When children feel safe enough to speak, and when adults are wise enough to listen with care rather than react with agendas, real understanding becomes possible. Only then can schools truly serve their most important purpose, helping every student thrive. You said, what accountability looks like expanded into 7 paragraphs without bold and italic text, also without headings. ChatGPT said, accountability in schools is more important now than ever before, especially when it comes to sensitive issues like gender identity and student confidentiality. Schools are meant to be institutions that educate, support, and protect students, but also ones that respect the rights of families and follow ethical and legal standards. When questions arise about whether schools are transitioning students without parental knowledge, the immediate need is not to assign blame, but to understand how such situations occurred and what systems allowed them. Accountability begins by examining the policies, decisions, and communications that guide staff actions on such delicate matters. There must be a clear standard for how schools approach gender identity issues, particularly when students request changes to names, pronouns, or gender markers. School districts need transparent policies that outline what steps are taken, who is involved, and how families are notified or not notified. These policies should not be buried in legal language or hidden from public view. They must be accessible, clear, and discussed openly with both staff and families. Without transparency, confusion and mistrust thrive, and both students and parents are left uncertain about who is making decisions and why. Schools should also be held responsible for ensuring that their staff receive proper training. Teachers and counselors should not be expected to navigate complex gender identity requests on their own. They need specific guidance on how to respond appropriately, what legal and ethical standards they must follow, and when to involve parents or mental health professionals. It is not fair or sustainable to place such weighty decisions on educators without preparing them properly. Accountability means giving school staff the tools and clarity they need to act in ways that are both supportive and respectful of families. Another part of accountability is communication. When schools avoid open conversations with parents under the belief that they are protecting the student, they risk creating long-term harm. Good intentions are not a substitute for communication and trust. Schools must find ways to involve families early and often, even in difficult or sensitive situations. This does not mean outing a student who could be in danger, but it does mean working toward family inclusion whenever it is safe and possible. Policies that default to secrecy should be re-examined to make room for compassion, dialogue, and resolution. Oversight also plays a major role. School boards, administrators, and even state education departments need to regularly review how policies are implemented. Are they being followed consistently? Are students being supported responsibly? Are parents being informed when appropriate? This kind of evaluation requires feedback from all sides: students, parents, teachers, and community members. Accountability grows stronger when leaders are willing to ask tough questions, admit when a system is flawed, and make necessary changes. No policy should be beyond critique, especially when it affects children's lives so directly. Laws and regulations matter too. Clear, enforceable laws help prevent abuse of discretion and ensure that everyone is playing by the same rules. As different states adopt different approaches to parental notification and student privacy, it is essential that legal frameworks protect children's well-being while also honoring the role of parents. Accountability in this context means respecting the law, following proper procedures, and being transparent about how those laws are interpreted and applied in schools. Without consistency in these areas, children and families are left with uncertainty and sometimes fear. Ultimately, accountability is about balance. It is about ensuring that schools are safe places where students feel supported, while also ensuring that families are respected and included. It is about creating policies that protect vulnerable youth without silencing parents who care deeply for their children. And it is about remembering that every action taken in a school, especially one involving a child's identity, has real emotional and psychological consequences. When schools act with integrity, communicate clearly, and seek solutions in partnership with families, accountability is not a burden. It becomes the foundation for trust and lasting support.